Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to our daily town hall here at 5:30. We're glad you're with us. A little bit later on, we're going to answer some of your travel questions, and we also have important information for parents about their kids' vaccines, even if they are going to be doing school remotely. Plus, we will get to our top story in just a moment on that court ruling today regarding weddings and how many guests can attend. This could have implications far beyond just wedding nuptials. But we do want to start here with some breaking news. We've been covering the unemployment situation and how that extra $600 a week from the federal government expired a while back. Well, Congress could not come to an agreement, and so President Trump signed a memo essentially giving jobless workers an extra $300 a week. The money is technically now coming from FEMA, but states have to opt into that, and New York was not doing so. But today, that changed. New York is now among the states that's colored in the kind of darker shade of green there. New York before was not participating in this federal program known as lost wage assistance, but we got a statement late this afternoon saying New York will apply. Now, only those states highlighted in bright green have actually been approved so far, so that's the distinction. We don't know how quickly FEMA will review and approve New York, and it will most definitely be weeks before anybody sees any money, so we will, of course, keep you posted. But again, the breaking news tonight is that New York will apply for that federal lost wage assistance program after all. Now back to our top story, and a wedding planned at the Sterling Restaurant at Arrowhead Golf Club in Akron tomorrow will not happen quite as planned. The couple getting married filed suit against the state's restriction of just 50 people, and they won in federal court. They had planned to have almost 200 people there tomorrow. But today an appeals court put a hold on all of that, meaning the 50-person limit for weddings remains in effect. Now that is not the end of this, though, and a lot of questions remain. And joining us right now is someone who doesn't really need an introduction to our viewers because you see him all the time. Paul Cambria is a Buffalo defense attorney, constitutional expert, and is always nice enough to help guide us through these sometimes complicated legal cases. Paul, thanks for your time.
My pleasure.
All right, so give me the top line takeaway that you have from this stay that the appeals court has issued in this case.
Well, it's really unfortunate. This is sort of getting caught in court traffic because you see the appellate court did not make a ruling. It didn't say that the ruling below was an inappropriate ruling. All it said was we're going to stay the stay, if you will, until a panel of our court can look into it. Well, of course, the problem with that is the wedding's tomorrow. So in the end, they lose.
So walk us through how we've gotten to this point and then what is going to happen next. I know that you have a district court, which in federal court is kind of the trial court, right? So you had the district judge that made a ruling and then it was appealed to this circuit court. For people who are unaware, what's happened so far?
Well, basically what happens is you file your lawsuit in front of the district court judge. He made a decision. He decided he was going to issue a preliminary injunction. Once he does that, that becomes automatically appealable. The appeal goes to New York City. Our federal courts in our district, in our circuit, the Second Circuit, all the appeals are in New York City. And there are a bunch of judges who sit in three-person panels, and they rule on these cases. Here, what happened is apparently a panel was not immediately available. And so they basically said, well, we're going to wait till a panel's available to discuss the issues and decide whether the judge below was correct. The problem is the wedding's tomorrow. So here, because of the court and its apparent unavailability, they lose.
Interesting. Yeah, and you're right. The practical impact of it is 50-person limit for this wedding tomorrow. When we talk about the merits of the case, though, where do you come down on this, and where do you think the circuit court is going to come down on?
Well, the thing there's two colliding things here, if you will. Number one, allowing the governor to, mandate or to manage this crisis, so to speak. But on the other hand, citizens can't be dealt with, in kind of I don't want to say willy-nilly, but in a ultimate discretionary manner. In other words, One day it's okay to have more than 50 people in a restaurant, but at the same time, you can't have more than 50 people at a wedding gathering. And you ask yourself, what's the difference? If you're following the COVID requirements with distancing, masks, and all the rest of it, what's the difference? And I think that's what it's going to come down to. And we're going to look at, and the courts are going to look at, whether or not these regulations are arbitrary. Is there a good reason for them? Or are they just, throwing them out because it's spur of the moment, everything is happening quickly, and so they're saying we're doing the best we can. And the courts have to look into that.
So ultimately, you think, and this may be weeks or even months away, but ultimately you think that 50-person limit for weddings probably doesn't pass muster here.
It doesn't make sense if they follow the same rules. And if you're in a banquet hall or what have you, they have these rules. They can follow these rules. If you had a very large restaurant and you had 50% capacity and that's 100 people, why couldn't you have a wedding with 100 people if you followed the same rules? That's the issue.
Yeah, finally, Paul, let me ask you, do you think that whatever the ultimate decision in this case will have broader application beyond just weddings?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think if a court comes down and says, look, the regulation has to make sense. It can't be arbitrary, capricious, and so on. It has to make sense. It has to have a factual, rational basis. That's going to apply to other situations. I mean, we just had the SLA come up with a new regulation yesterday that said that you could have entertainment in your restaurant or bar, but you can't advertise it. So you ask yourself, how does that make any sense? I mean, if I lure them in with a steak dinner and I get 50 people, or I advertise and I get 50 people, in the end, I still have 50 people. What's the difference? So it's crazy.
Yeah, there I know is a lot of interest in this case, and it's not always easy for lay people like us to understand. So, Paul, thanks for guiding us through this. Thanks for your time.
A pleasure.
And a town hall update now on the reopening of gyms. We told you how Erie County will allow all gyms to start reopening this Monday, the earliest date set by the state, as long as they follow a bunch of rules. Well, today Niagara County essentially said the same. The legislature chairwoman also announced that indoor classes will be allowed. That is a decision that the governor left up to each individual county. Now, in order to open on Monday, the first day available, Niagara County gyms will have to affirm that they've met all of the state's reopening guidelines, complete a safety plan, and have an inspection schedule. That inspection will have to happen within 2 weeks of opening. Well, with the new school year about to get underway, parents are checking off their back-to-school to-do lists, no doubt. One top priority should be their vaccinations. And we wanted to take a moment to go over some of the requirements and recommendations backed by both the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics. Children are required by New York State to be up to date within 14 days of the first day of school or daycare. And yes, that requirement still stands, even if your child is attending virtually.
So if you have a kindergartner, they have to have their 4-year-old vaccines before they will be permitted to take classes in school, the same as if they were attending classes in person.
The big ages to remember for school vaccinations are 4, 11, and 16. Let's start with that pre-K group. Some recommended immunizations for 4-year-olds include tetanus, polio, hepatitis B, chickenpox, and MMR. That's measles, mumps, and rubella.
If your child is up to date at 4 and they've had their 4-year-old vaccines, then they will be admitted to school.
In the preteen years, there's more.
So at 11-year-old, they get an additional set of boosters and 1 new meningitis vaccine that's required before they go to school.
This is also when parents and pediatricians consider the first in a series of 2 HPV vaccinations.
Vaccination can prevent up to 90% of any HPV-related cancers.
The American Cancer Society says before the COVID outbreak, more parents were getting their preteens and teenagers vaccinated. Then in April, a 70% drop in those cancer prevention immunizations. Now, the number hovers around 50%. Doctors trying to get those kids, boys and girls, back into their offices.
I talked to a mom yesterday who goes, "Oh, I forgot to get her the second one within 6 months, so now do I have to get both of them again?"
That's a great question. No, as long as the child is under 15 years old, they can still complete the 2-dose series.
By age 16, there's one more recommendation.
They get another meningitis vaccine at that time.
Dr. Don Johnson says the overall point of these immunizations is especially important now to mitigate outbreaks of vaccine-preventable illnesses.
In the setting of coronavirus, it's very important that we try not to overburden our healthcare system. So in the fall, we want to prevent seeing an outbreak of measles in the setting of flu and coronavirus. And that's why it's one reason why it's important to get vaccines on the regular schedule.
Yeah, in 2 footnotes here, there is a separate and different type of meningitis vaccine for college-aged young adults. And then as for the HPV vaccine, you can get catch-up immunizations up to age 26 if you miss them earlier in life. Now, if all of this seems confusing or you didn't have time to write it all down, don't worry. The best advice really is just to keep up with your pediatrician appointments, and your doctor should tell you exactly what your child is due for and when, so that you don't miss anything important.